Shabbat Sholom, everyone, and good Shabbos. It is Friday evening here in Huntington. And if you've been following the calendar, not the Hebrew calendar, because we're in the month of Elul leading up to the high holidays, but on the secular calendar, today marks the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, which included Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. 57 years ago today. And one of the things that always amazes me when I either read about the March on Washington or go back and review the speech is that Dr. King was 34 years old when he gave that speech. A very, very young man. And he changed the world with that speech. And 5 years later, when he was 39, he'd be dead. He'd be murdered in Memphis, I believe. So much has been accomplished, but there's so much more to do, and we shouldn't despair. That I know that it looks tough out there, and lots of unrest and all sorts of things going on in the streets, but we shouldn't despair. Rabbi Tarfon, a very famous rabbi in the Talmud and in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, says, "It's not your duty to finish the work." Meaning the work is going to go on long after we're here, whatever that work may be. But he says, neither are you at liberty to neglect it. Meaning you can't just ignore what's going on. We need to be part of the work that needs to be done to make the world a better place. And so each step is a step closer. And I just wanted to let you know on this Erev Shabbat that 57 years ago, we heard the I Have a Dream speech. All right, it's a kind of muggy evening here in Huntington. The sun has been out, and we're going to enter into Kabbalat Shabbat. But first, we're going to light candles, and I have Sam up here, who's both tech guru and candle lighter this evening.
O source of light and truth, Creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahalik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. All right, let's continue reading responsively on page 6 in the middle of the page. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship.
They welcome all who have cares unburdened, thanks to express, hopes to nurture.
May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity.
May its threshold be a stumbling block to young or straying feet.
May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness.
May the synagogue be, for all who enter, a doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
All right, we jump ahead to page 20. Page 20 for Lecha Dodi. And I think we'll change up the tune this week. We'll do, I don't know if it's really a Hasidic tune, but we'll do what I consider the Hasidic version of Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yadalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikavela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yadalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikavela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי, ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובשולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, יללי, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. If it's not a Hasidic tune, it should be. We need to find a Hasidic Rebbe who will take credit for that particular tune, that particular niggin. Makes you kind of want to dance on Shabbat. But let's turn the page to 22 for verses from Psalm 92, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, the psalm, a song for Shabbat, and let's read together. It is good to praise Adonai, to sing hymns to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your steadfast love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night, with a 10-stringed harp, with voice and lyre together. You have gladdened me by your deeds, Adonai. I shout for joy at your handiwork. Great are your works, Adonai. How very subtle your designs. A brute cannot know, a fool cannot understand this. Let's continue in the indented Hebrew. Tzaddik tamar yifrach, ke'erez Levanon yizkeh shetuli beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun b'seva l'shemim vera'ananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai Suri velo havlatabo. Let's turn the page to 24 and we'll welcome the two angels who come to spend Shabbat with us. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitzchem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We jump ahead to page 145. We've just welcomed Shabbat. We've eased our way into Shabbat from the work week. And I know schools have opened up. Universities are starting to open up. And for a lot of people, this was the first week back to school. And so we kind of ease. And we'll continue with the Arvit service, the evening service, page 145 with Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad yivrach cherutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon hu v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, Bahagala, uvizman kahariv, v'yemiru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam lo me'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudisha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'yemiru amen. We're on page 146 for Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. On page 147, let's read together in the English. Adonai, your majesty is proclaimed by marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom. Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures. All things pass. Let not your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you, and endow our fleeting days with abiding youth. Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim. Page 148, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amchavta Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al Kain Adonai Eloheinu, B'Shovenu V'Kumeinu, Nasiach Bechukecha, V'Nismach B'Divrei Toratecha, U'V'Mitzvotecha, Le'olam Va'ed. Ki heim chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nehege yomam v'layla v'ahavatcha tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol vavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol miodecha ve'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha b'veitecha, uvlektecha v'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, uv'shartam liot al yadecha, v'hayu latotafot beineinecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uv'isharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim le'elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. On page 151 in the middle, let's read responsively. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp, as imperfection and evil abound.
Before our eyes, there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of it. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
Top of page 152, we'll continue with Mi Chamocha.
Mi kamocha ba'alim Adonai.
Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Norah tehilot, O Sefer. Mi kamocha ba'alim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Norah tehilot, O Sefer, O Sefer. Bokeyam lifnei Moshe, Ze'eli anu v'yamru, Adonai yimloch li'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, ugalo mi'et chazach mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Page 153, the top two lines of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom Lehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom Lehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. And in the middle of the page, let's read together. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Top of page 154, Vishamru, verses from the book of Shemot, from the book of Exodus, talking about Shabbat. Top of page 154. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti li'olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. We're on page 155, the beginning of the Amidah, also known as Tefillah. We'll chant 155, 156, and 157 together, and then we'll continue silently from 158 through the end on 167. And during this time, you can chant along with us. You can read along with us in the Hebrew or in the English, or offer up your own special prayer at this time. But we're going to continue together on 155. Adonai sifatai tiftachu v'yagi tehilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftachu v'yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei HaKol, Vezocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Goel Livnei B'neihem, Leman Shemo V'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magai, Magin Avraham, V'Ezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, V'chayei metim ata rab lehoshia, Modrid hatal, Mechokel chayim b'chesed, V'chayei metim b'rachamim rabim, Somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, Umatir asurim, umekayem emunato, lishenei afar, nichamocha mal gevurot, umidol melach, melech memit umechayem, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'neman ata l'chayot metim, Baruch ata Adonai, Mechayeh hametim. Let's turn back to page 160 in the middle of the page and let's read together. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Let's continue with Ritzeh.
Ritzeh, Ritzeh, Ritzeh Adonai Eloheinu, V'yamata Yisrael. Ujahira Ratzon Tami. Ujahira Ratzon Tami. Avodat Israel. Amen. Baruch atah Shelterka levadecha vayiradav Shelterka levadecha
Let's turn to page 163 and we'll read responsively at the top of the page. For the good in us, which calls us to a better life, we give thanks.
For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise.
For the desire in us, which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful.
For life and nature, harmony and beauty, for the hope of tomorrow, all praise to the source of being.
And now, top of page 164, we'll continue with the prayer for peace. Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lekol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'einecha levorech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol einu b'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. And in the middle of 164, let's read responsively. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, our eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes.
Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of our world. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart.
Praised are you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivarech et amo Yisrael, v'shalom. All right, let's jump ahead to page 253. Page 253, we'll continue with the Mishaberach, the song in this case, written by Debbie Friedman, asking for God to heal people. And if you know somebody who needs some special healing this Shabbat, whether it's physical, spiritual, emotional, any kind of healing, keep them close to your hearts and in your thoughts as we continue in the middle of the page. Mishaberach Avotenu Mechor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishebeherach Imotenu Mikor habracha Leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. All right, let's move ahead to page 258 with the prayers for our congregation, our country, and for the state of Israel, and we'll read these together. Source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us: love of Torah, devotion in prayer, and support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yirah na'avod. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry, and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing, and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. The middle of page 259. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Golo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Smichat Gulatenu, Hagein Aleha Biavrat Chasdecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'Amitecha L'Rosheha, Sareha V'Yoetzeha, V'Takneim Be'etzah Tova Milfanecha, V'natata Sholom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. All right, friends, we are this week at Parshat Ki Teitzei. Parshat Ki Teitzei, and it's Moshe continuing his final speeches to Bnei Yisrael. And this week, hold your hats, hold on to your kippot, because we get 72, count them, 72 new commandments. Not much else happens in this week's Parsha. Moshe lists off 72 commandments. A number of them are new to the book of Deuteronomy. All right, some of them we haven't seen before, but a number of them we have seen before. This is the largest number of mitzvot, of commandments found in any parsha from the book of Exodus up until this point. And the mitzvot are wide-ranging and diverse. There's a little bit of everything in the commandments. For example, I'm just going to give you a number of them. Ben sorer umorer, the rebellious child, the child who talks back to his or her parents, often called the defiant son, right? The son who defies mom and dad publicly. He is brought before the elders at the city gates, and if he is found guilty, he is taken out and put to death by stoning. The rabbis in the Talmud, many centuries after this, decide that they are going to make this law almost impossible to enforce. Right? They realize that children can, in fact, be rebellious, but not every child who is a little rebellious should be taken out and stoned. And if that happened, there wouldn't be many kids running around, if any. What the rabbis do later on is say, well, both parents have to come forward. Okay, that's fair enough. And each parent is taken to a different place. And the father tells his story, and the mother tells her story. And they have to be exact. If the father says the child was rebellious on Monday at noon, and the wife says the child was rebellious around noon, it's disqualified. They have to be word for word. They have to be exact. And the rabbis, so they make it even more impossible, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between the father's voice and the mother's voice. They have to sound exactly the same. So the person who's listening to the father, if he goes and listens to the mother, it's going to sound exactly the same. And so the rabbis of the early part of our tradition of rabbinic Judaism, they write this law out of existence. Then the Torah gives us an interesting commandment. It says, you shall not remain indifferent. And the rabbis and the Torah link this to lost property. If you find something that is lost, you have to make every effort to return it. And even if it's your enemy, right? The neighbor that you don't like, his goat gets into your yard, or you find his goat down on 3rd Avenue. You can't just ignore it. You have to try to get the goat and take it back to that person, even if the person is your enemy. And the rabbis, and the Torah, actually, not the rabbis, I have the rabbis on the brain today. The Torah says that we're also responsible to help those in need. This is that idea of not remaining indifferent. You can't turn your back on the needy. Right? You have to be willing to help them. And the Torah also says that you can't profit from the items. Right? So if you find somebody's chicken and the chicken lays eggs, you yourself can't take those eggs and eat them or sell them. You can't benefit from them. And if you do, say you take them and you sell them, right? You have a number of eggs, they're going to go bad, you don't eat eggs, and you take them to the market and you sell them. When you return the chicken, or when the chicken's owner comes home or finds you, you have to say, look, I used some of the eggs, I sold them, and I need to pay you back the money, the equivalent. Right? This is to keep people from taking advantage of not wanting to return something. So, and this is a key idea in keeping society secure, that you can rely on your neighbors, that you don't have to live in fear that if you drop your wallet and your neighbor finds it, that your neighbor is going to keep it. Now, I understand that some of you might be thinking that, well, Rabbi, that works in a small town where everybody knows anybody, but I guarantee you if you drop your wallet in Manhattan, before it hits the ground, it will be gone. Well, that's the kind of society that we've allowed to develop. And so, shame on us. We get the idea of a mamzer. Now, a mamzer is an interesting word. In Yiddish, mamzer means bastard. If you call somebody a mamzer, you're calling his parentage into question. But it's not a bastard in the way that, say, the royal family would think of a child born out of wedlock as being a bastard son. It's the product of a forbidden sexual relationship, right? It's not two people who aren't married having a child together. That does not bring about the qualification of being a mamzer. An incestuous relationship or an adulterous relationship. The child that is born out of one of those two is considered a mamzer and is not allowed to be part of Bnei Yisrael. Right. So on the heels of the mamzer issue, we get a statement about adultery. Right. We already know that adultery is out. That's from the Aseret HaDibrot, but it carries the death penalty. Right. If you are accused of adultery and then found guilty of adultery, it carries the death penalty for both, the man and the woman. Now, adultery is defined as a man who has sex with a woman. I'm sorry, never mind. Adultery, and we'll cover this next week when we get to it in the Aseret HaDibrot, when we get to it in the 10 utterances. But it's a man having sex with a married woman or a betrothed woman, a woman who is engaged. Right? The man can be married in the Bible. We're allowed to have many wives, but they give us an interesting case here in the Torah. There's a man who has sex with a woman who is engaged to another man. That's adulterous. If it happens in the city, both of them are put to death. If they're accused and it took place in a field, only the man is put to death, because it's understood that the woman would have screamed out and no one heard her in the field. But if it took place in the city and no one heard her yell, it meant that she didn't yell out and she went into the relationship willingly. And we could have all sorts of talks about how it's not necessarily the truth, but that's for another time. We get the idea of yibum, which is levirate marriage. And a number of years ago, there was a movie called Loving Leah that showed up on, I think it was the Lifetime movie network. And what it is if a man and a woman are married and the husband dies, and he doesn't have a son, the brother of the man, the next brother down, is obligated to marry the woman, the widow, and the first son that they have together is considered to be the dead brother's son. So if the man who died was named Yaakov, the child born to his brother and his widow would be Yosef ben Yaakov, for example. And there are ways of getting out of this. If the woman doesn't want to marry the brother, or the brother doesn't want to marry the woman, there's a ritual that takes place where she walks up to him, spits at him, throws her sandal, and she's released to marry whomever she wants. And he's the brother who doesn't want to marry her, or she doesn't want to marry, is no longer required to marry her. And we see this in the book of Ruth. This happens in the book of Ruth. And towards the end, we're commanded to treat our workers with respect, and that you pay them on the day that they work. Right? In biblical times, they were day laborers, and you paid them at the end of the day, so that they could go and get their food and pay their whatever they need to pay. And then the very end of the Torah of this week's reading, we're commanded to blot out the name of Amalek. Amalek was the king who came up behind Bnei Yisrael and as they were marching through the desert, and took advantage and killed the slow, the young, the old, the infirm. And we're told that qualifies that we're to blot out his name, Amalek. Okay, so that's this week's Torah portion. And now we are up to the 6th, I can't believe it, the 6th of the Aseret HaDibrot. And this one is, I would be willing to wager that this is the most often incorrectly translated verse of the Torah. And it's just 2 words. And it's 2 easy words. It's not like it's a word that only shows up one time in the text. It's called a hapax legomena. It just shows up one time. No, this is a fairly common word in biblical Hebrew. The first word is lo, which means no or don't. And it's tirtzak, don't murder. You shall not murder. If you look at most English translations, especially if they are not translated by Jews, they're not considered Jewish translations, you know this commandment as you shall not kill. And that is a mistranslation. It's the wrong word. It's not lo tiharog, which would mean you are not to kill. It's lo tirtzak, and that means do not murder. And one is more restrictive than the other, right? The you will not murder is more restrictive than you will not kill. Because the murder suggests that it's premeditated, that you thought this out. Whereas if you kill someone, it could be in the heat of the moment, which is still problematic. It could be accidental, which again is still problematic. We set up the 6 cities of refuge so that people who are accused or who are found guilty of accidental manslaughter can live out their day, live safely without having to worry about the blood price. So the idea is it's the intention, right? You shall not murder. Because the Torah mandates, if you're following, I can see some people at home saying, listen, Rabbi, but the Torah says, blot out Amalek, right? We kill Amalek. And it says that we can go to war, that we're going to have to go to war. And it says that you can kill somebody in self-defense. And you mentioned, Rabbi, several times that there's capital punishment in the Torah. So it can't be just not to kill. And you're right, it's you will not murder. But even for the rabbis, they found the idea of even capital punishment for murder to be problematic. The rabbis didn't like the idea of taking a life for a life, even though that's what the Torah mandates. Torah says if a man spills another man's blood, his blood too shall be spilled. But the rabbis decide that no, that if you're going to carry out capital punishment, the person who's doing the murder, it has to be witnessed by 2 credible witnesses. And the witnesses have to go up to him before he commits the murder and say, you know, what you're doing is wrong and it carries the death penalty. And the guy who's doing the murder then has to verbally affirm to the 2 witnesses that yes, he understands, both of them, that he is committing murder and it is a capital offense. And then the witnesses actually have to witness the murder. Right? So the rabbis make it impossible, right? Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to walk up and say, hey, by the way, mister, don't shoot that guy. That's murder. You know that's murder. The rabbis they write it out of existence. As a matter of fact, then, to make matters worse, the person has to be tried by 23 judges. It can only take place in the temple. It has to be a majority of 2 judges, right? So it has to be a majority of 2 judges that find him guilty. And if it's a unanimous vote, if all 23 judges find him guilty, the verdict is annulled because the rabbis say he didn't get a vigorous defense. Because they know that you can't get 23 Jews to agree on anything, much less something so serious as a capital case. So the idea of murder is still very serious. And even though the rabbis, try to get away from capital punishment, the rabbis include murder or extend the idea of murder to include other behaviors, not just the physical taking of life, although that is the top, right? Ibn Ezra, a famous medieval commentator, says that you can murder somebody physically, this we understand, but also through speech, by lying about someone, by gossiping about them, by deliberately giving them fatal advice, or failing to reveal a secret that might save a life. And then it's extended to if you cause someone to lose their livelihood out of spite. Again, this is not an accidental thing, right? All of this is premeditated through carelessness and for not providing safety for travelers, right? You give somebody knowingly wrong directions, or you send them off on a wild goose chase and they get killed, right? You could be, according to Ibn Ezra, held accountable for murder. And if you think about it, right, that makes a lot of sense. That when we willfully or intentionally murder something about a person, for example, someone's in a good mood and we ruin that good mood, right, out of spite. Somebody had something wonderful happen to them and we either blow them off or we make them feel bad. We ruin somebody's good name through gossip or slander. We kill someone's self-esteem by commenting on how they look, their weight, whether or not they stutter, any number of ways. We murder someone's joy, their happiness. All of these we could be guilty of. Right? So the idea of murder just being something that was really out of the, right? I mean, I've wanted to kill my brother. I don't think I've wanted to murder him. Right? Usually when my brother would upset me, I'm sure mom is watching this and my brother will hear that, when he was younger, he was not always my favorite person. Right? But you would think, I'm going to send him to the gypsies or I'm going to, throw him off the cliff or whatever. But it was in the heat of the moment. Never did I sit up late at night plotting my brother's demise. I think that's well beyond most of us. Very few of us sit up plotting the demise of others. But the idea is still there, that we do kill people. We do murder people, maybe not physically, but we do emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. We hurt them that way. Not only by our words, but by our actions, how we behave around people. Another Spanish commentator named Abarbanel says that this, although it seems like it's a single commandment, do not murder, it's a heading that contains a myriad of commandments and behaviors that we shouldn't do. And so it's the beauty of our Torah, right? 2 words can open up a whole way of looking at things and a way of looking at our world and how we treat people in it. And this is this is the first of the Aseret HaDibrot that doesn't actually mention God. And we've made that bridge, like I said last week, we bridged over from commandments about how we deal with God and what God expects our relationship with God to be, to our parents, to Shabbat, then to our parents. And now the rest of the commandments, the rest of the Aseret HaDibrot deal with how we interact with each other. So this week it was murder. Next week, it's adultery. All right? All right, friends. Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos. All right, I think we're at Aleinu, if I'm not mistaken. Alrighty, it's time for Aleinu, page 282. Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahen, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam.
ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים עמו, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אינו, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבתה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אלינו.
Let's read together in the top of page 285. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz. Vayom hahu Yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Since it is the month of Elul, there's a special psalm we read from the beginning of Elul all the way through Hoshana Rabbah, the end of Sukkot. Unfortunately, it's not in the Siddur that we have here, but I made a copy, and so Sam and James back there will read responsibly. Psalm 27, a psalm of David. Adonai is my light and my help, whom shall I fear? Adonai is the strength of my life, whom shall I dread?
When evildoers draw near to slander me, when foes threaten, they stumble and fall. Though armies be arrayed against me, I have no fear. Though wars threaten, I remain steadfast in my faith.
One thing I ask of Adonai, for this I yearn, to dwell in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to behold God's beauty, to pray in God's sanctuary.
Hiding me in his shrine, safe from peril, God will shelter me beyond the reach of disaster, and raise my head high above my enemies.
I will bring God offerings with shouts of joy, singing, chanting praise to Adonai.
Adonai, hear my voice when I call. Be gracious to me and answer me. It is you whom I seek, says my heart. It is your presence that I seek, Adonai.
Do not hide from me. Do not reject your servant. You have always been my help. Do not abandon me. Forsake me not, my God of deliverance.
Though my father and my mother leave me, Adonai will care for me.
Teach me your way, Adonai. Guide me on the right path to confound my oppressors.
Do not abandon me to the way of my foes, for false witnesses have risen against me, purveyors of malice and lies.
Yet I have faith that I shall surely see Adonai's goodness in the land of the living. Hope in Adonai. Be strong, take courage, and hope in Adonai. Leulei hamati l'rot b'tuv Adonai be'eretz chayim, kaveh el Adonai, chazak v'yametz libecha, v'kaveh el Adonai. This week we observed the following yard sites: Max G. Glick, David and Billy's uncle; Aaron Herbert, Hal Herbert's father, Alice's father-in-law; Miriam Frances Hyman, Jack Hyman's cousin, daughter of Isidore and Eva; Sarah Rebecca Kaplan, relative of Saul Kaplan; Charles A. Mayer, Jane Glick's father; Jenny Cohen, David Glick's maternal grandmother; Harry Greenstein, Irving's father; Mac was his wife; Isaac Himmelstein, Dennis Hamill's father; Herbert Mazo; Austin Moore, friend of Judy Lundy; Bessie Pastor, Ethel Levine's mother; Sarah Tarbett, Derek Hyman's aunt; Patricia Hyman, Jack Hyman's wife, Derek's mother; Morris Klausner, Lynn Mayer's uncle; Sam Ratowski, Harold Radell's father; Judy Woodruff's grandfather; Hannah Tepper, relative of Valerie White; Sylvia Glazer, Hoyt's mother, Melanie's mother-in-law, Seth and Lydia's grandmother; Bertha Hyman Oringer, Lynn Mayer's maternal grandmother; Milton Levine, Ethel's husband, father of Mo and Bernard; Don Kuros, husband of Betty, father to Mark, Bob, Brian, and David; Nathan Kaplan, Saul's brother. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May their memories be a blessing to us always, and may they all rest in peace. Mourner's Kaddish is found on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, v'yalmad yivrach hirutei v'yamlik malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam l'amei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shmei dekusha brichu. Le'elam in kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Da'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'bramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos. Let's see. Services tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for Shabbat morning services, and then on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Sunday afternoon, we have a high holiday class at 3 o'clock. The Zoom invitation has gone out, and so hope to see everybody for some learning on Sunday afternoon at 3. Wednesday is the Yiddish choir, the best Yiddish choir anywhere, and so a Zoom invitation will go out early in the week for that. And Sam, is there anything else? Is that no?
No, I think that's it.
All right, let me see who has logged on and said Shabbat Shalom to us. Look at that, I'm up close. Tom Pressman, Melanie Samuels from Brooklyn, Zeph Raphaim, Shabbat Shalom in Hebrew to you as well, and Jenny Bro, wishing us all a peaceful Shabbat. So these are the folks who let us know that they're watching, and so Shabbat Shalom to them, and Shabbat Shalom to us all. I want to say thank you to Sam and to James and to Judy for being here, acting as tech gurus and choir, and so all good things here. And so we'll close out on 321. 321 with Adon Olam. Adon Olam asher malach B'terem kol yitzir nivra, li'et nasa b'chefza kol, azai melech shemo nikra, v'yacharei kiglot hakol. Levado imloch nora, vehu haya, vehu hoveh, vehu yiyeh b'tifara, vehu echad v'ein sheni, lahamshilo lahakbira, beli reshit, beli tachlit, Velo haos v'hamisra, vehu eli v'chai goali, v'tzor hevli v'yitzara, vehu nisi umanosli, menat kosi b'yom ekra, b'yahado afkid ruchi. Be'eti shan be'ayira, be'im ruchi giviati, Adonai li velo ira. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Good Shabbos. We'll see you soon.